Johnny Mac at JF McMullen on Twitter, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as Nick Foles speaking today up at the NovaCare Complex, among some others, but really Foles, the keynote speaker, I would say there. When you get the Super Bowl MVP speaking, John, it's a special moment.
Yeah, most famous backup quarterback in the world, as I call him. And shockingly, he wants to be a starter.
Can you believe it? Now, did he indicate that again today? Now, he had said on a Texas television station, he indicated that. Did he further that comment today to you guys?
Yeah, and he went a little bit farther. He said he was surprised that that created waves because obviously he wants to be a starter in this league. Sort of some of the things I mentioned yesterday on the show. He's a competitive athlete. That's the nature that they have, and especially coming off a Super Bowl. Of course he wants to be a starting quarterback, but he realizes that's not in the cards right here at this particular time. And he sort of brought up his mantra that he had at the end of the last season, which was live by the moment. And for now, he's the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles because Carson's not ready to go. But he also realizes when Carson is ready to go, he's going to go be a backup. And that's what this contract restructure was about, to give him a little extra money and also reward him if he is forced into action this season, while also leaving open the opportunity to hit free agency next year, where in theory he can go find a job sort of unfettered and not have to worry about the trade market.
John, Mike talked about that Texas TV station that Nick talked about and gave the interview to, but at any point did he go to the Eagles and say, look, I could see the handwriting at the wall? Did he ever take the initiative to go to them and say, this is the situation, guys, be up front with me, what's the story, can you move me, or is he just sitting back and letting them drive the train?
No, he was sure to say he's not trying to force anything, and as Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson have said, they've kept Nick in the loop when it comes to any potential trade talk. He mentioned that, but ultimately he said it's their decision. He realizes that, and he understands the grass isn't always greener. So from that standpoint, and what he went through with the Rams kind of makes him realize that this is not the worst situation in the world, while at the same time, as I said, believing in himself and understanding he should be, needs to be, wants to be a starting quarterback in this league. But it's probably not going to happen this season for him.
John McMullen with us. Nick Foles talks today, playing hunky-dory, allegedly, says he wants to be a starter, though, and wants to lead a team again. I mean, this balancing act, can he continue to pull it off?
Yeah, I think he can because of the type of guy he is. I think it wouldn't work in most situations. But I think, and Nick called it unique, the situation itself. First and foremost, it starts with the fact that Carson and Nick are very good friends off the field. That's part of it, so you don't have sort of that dysfunction of somebody trying to undercut somebody else. And the second part is Nick's like the rest of the people in this organization and realizes Carson's a superstar. He's a level above your average starter in this league. So there really is no performance-based pressure placed on Carson Wentz because he's just a better player. So all of that enters into it. And I think from that standpoint, that's the one good part of this for the Eagles is that they understand because of the type of guy Nick is, and he's rock solid off the field. He always talks about his faith, his family. He's not going to create waves, even though he would prefer, obviously, at this stage of his career, to be a starting quarterback.
Why do you think he didn't go to the team? I mean, we had Jason Avant on, and I thought he made an interesting point. This was back right after the Super Bowl, and he said, the right thing is for them to go with him, sit there, and have him give a couple of teams that he would feel comfortable going to and see if they can work something out. Why do you think Nick Foles didn't say, hey, guys, I'd like to start if that opportunity arises. Here's a couple teams I'd be interested in moving to.
Well, I think Jason obviously is a former player. That's the way players think, but that's not the reality of the situation. The Eagles have been very upfront that they would do everything possible to get Nick in a good situation, but they weren't going to give him away, and they wanted significant value for him. That's the hurdle. And as I said, Nick acknowledged the fact that ultimately it's not his decision. As far as Nick himself, I mean, he's a smart guy, and that's where you have plausible deniability, and the fact that I'm sure that has taken place, but it takes place with his agent, David Dunn. I'm sure he has gone to the Eagles and said, look, this guy's a starting quarterback. Let's try to get something done. And I think there is probably a little bit, I'm not going to call it bitterness because that's just not Nick's nature, but a little bit of disappointment that the Eagles didn't take that second-round pick when they had the opportunity. From Nick's standpoint, there's probably a little bit of what if, but there's not much you can do about it.
It's got, I mean, when he walks in a room now, is there a different aura? I mean, is it a different feel? Like he's the Super Bowl MVP. He's a Super Bowl champion who led the team, and he's not even really the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, he's got an air of confidence about him, as you can imagine, for what he did. I always said, I asked him, I mean, do you ever sit back? He talks about living in the moment. Do you ever sit back and think about what you did on the biggest stage of them all? And that's, you stood toe-to-toe with the best quarterback of all time, and you came out on top. Well, that's going to give you some confidence. And he's got some confidence that he didn't have last year. And it's understandable why.
John, you called him the best quarterback of all time. Speaking about Tom Brady, has Nick talked to Tom Brady yet? I mean, they famously didn't have the handshake after the game. Have they found a way in this offseason to connect with each other?
No, they haven't talked. Nick said at this point, he says he'll cross paths with them eventually. And he imagines. I know people made a big deal out of that. Nick did not. Obviously, there's a lot of chaos as soon as the final gun goes off in the Super Bowl. And then the part is, there's no question about it. When we talk about Tom Brady, and I called him the best quarterback of all time, Nick called him the best quarterback of all time, there's a reason for that. One of the major reasons for that is his competitiveness. He wasn't happy after they lost that football game. So I don't put much stock into anything, and certainly Tom Brady has no animus towards Nick Foles or vice versa.
Hey, John.
Real quick, John. At one point in time, the Kurt Warner story, or there's things that get made into movies or teleplays or biopics and things like that. Nick hasn't had any of that happen to him, right? I mean, other than the end of the year film and his role in it. I mean, has there been added attention or deals or things that have come because he got the spotlight at the Super Bowl?
Not yet, just the typical stuff. I don't think Nick sort of gravitates toward that type of thing, and he'd prefer just to stay home with his wife, and he had a child last year. That's just the type of guy he is. But I imagine because of his road and the fact that he was thinking about retirement after things went wrong with the Rams, and he came all the way back, and he took over late in the season, struggled, and ultimately overcame it and played lights out in the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. You could see that being a movie someday. And I don't know if Hollywood could have written that script, to be honest, unless they saw it, because it was so unlikely. I mean, I always go back to that post-game press conference Doug had at the NovaCare Complex after the Eagles got back from Los Angeles, and it was like a wake. Everybody in this city thought this season was over, and ultimately, the Eagles persevered and won the Super Bowl. It's one of the more unlikely stories in sports.
Yeah. Did he talk at all about the contract?
Yeah, he talked quite a bit. I was surprised. And he was very above board, as I said, about the starting thing and about explaining it and thanking Brandon Brooks, even though I don't think Brandon did all that much, except take a bit of a tax hit. But he talked about, I think it was Jeff McLean who asked him about the extension, and he was quick to clarify he didn't sign an extension. It was just a restructure. And he explained the mutual team option, which is basically a safety net from the Eagles' standpoint in case Carson Wentz is maybe injured again in a Teddy Bridgewater-like circumstance and not able to play. The Eagles can simply pay him $20 million to be the starter, and if not, they'll pay the $2 million back, and he'll be a free agent.
John, Jason Kelce spoke today for the first time since his...
Don't you mean the future mayor of Philadelphia?
outburst. What kind of Jason Kelce you guys get?
I got to tell you, man, well, Jason was really honest. Number one, I thought the most interesting part was he admitted he doubted himself as a player in 2016 after having really the poor start. And everyone talked about him being undersized and not good enough. And he questioned if he still had it. And he was able to come back due to some tweaks in technique and the fact he thought he got away from certain things and affected his game. But, we're late April now, and he got emotional again and broke down at one point thinking about the Super Bowl. And everything he's been through and what it means to all the fans of this city and how long they've been waiting. And that, that's one of the things, and I asked Jason, the human nature aspect of winning the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl hangover. And he's still emotional today. I said, how do you get back to that point to try to do it again? And I think that's going to be a story throughout the season because I just think there's a natural sort of satisfaction for human beings, not just the Eagles, but anybody, to say, okay, we won this thing. Now we can take the foot off the gas a little bit. But we'll see how that goes as the season, the off season, and everything rolls around.
Yeah, I know he's on, the Jumbotron at every Flyers game. He seemingly...
That fires up the crowd.
He did say something like when he goes out to breakfast now, he has to take a lot more pictures, but I would assume that's never going to stop. This guy is he's a rock star now.
Yeah, he is. Obviously. And, he actually, I often joke in his famous speech now, he was really yelling at the fans more than anything else, which I thought was ironic because of all the doubts that they had with him and other particular players. And he kind of admitted that today, which I thought was interesting. And, yeah, he's enjoying it. He is, and he just got married. And he's
if he would have waited until after that speech, he probably could have had the pick of the litter.
Yeah, well, he's a very smart guy because somebody asked him, I forget who asked him, is the Super Bowl the greatest moment in your life, winning the Super Bowl? And he said, I just got married. So he's a smart guy. You got to keep the wife happy, number one. And then he put the Super Bowl number two. But as I said, he got emotional today, and we're in late April. So it meant a lot to him.
John, there was something he said about the Vikings game, too, or if you could relate what that story was after the Vikings game when it finally hit him.
He was talking about it just, and if you remember Jason after the Super Bowl, he broke down. And he talked about after winning the NFC Championship game and just being in a shower at home and just thinking. And, he's, wasn't a highly recruited guy, had to walk on in college, has always been undersized, turned into a Pro Bowl player, and then he hit a rough patch in his career. And if you go back to last year at this time, we were all talking about, is Jason Kelce going to get traded? Is he going to get cut? And he turned out to be the best center in football. So I think it's been a whirlwind for him, and he's enjoyed it, and he still gets really, really sort of choked up when he thinks about it.
But does he have a street named after him? Because Fletcher Cox has a street named after him, right?
Yeah, he does. Fletcher Cox Road, which I think is a bad decision. I think Fletcher Cox Boulevard has a better ring to it. And Les Bowen chimed in when I tweeted that. Fletcher Cox Court, which I think is even better. So I give a hat tip to
the FCC.
To Les Bowen. But, yeah, I mean, the biggest road in his hometown is now Fletcher Cox Road. It used to be River Road. So it tells you what winning the Super Bowl does. And, you know, Fletcher's one of those guys, and Jason Kelce joked, you know, he couldn't put Fletcher Cox in his speech because everybody knows how good he is. And, you know, if he's not the best player on the Eagles, if he's not the most talented, he's certainly in the top three. And, you know, Fletcher, there's not much more he can do in this league. He's been an All-Pro. He's been a Pro Bowler. He's won a Super Bowl now. And he said next step is Defensive Player of the Year. So that's pretty much the lone goal he's got left.
Johnny Mac at JF McMullen. Check out his draft prospect rankings right now at 973ESPN.com. He talked to 3 NFL scouts on putting that list together.
I like the it's like a cheat sheet for the PT. Nice job by you, John. Thank you.
All right, Johnny. We will catch up tomorrow.
All right, thanks, guys.
John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.